Mysterious Ancient Mariners. Part 3. The Priest and the Pirates. In the fading light of a spring day around 1100 BC, a solitary Egyptian ship bobbed along the coast of Palestine, its bow cutting through the calm waters of the eastern Mediterranean. Aboard was a priest to Egypt's supreme deity Amun, who would later merge with Ra and become Amun-Ra, the more recognizable name from within the Egyptian pantheon. Whether his name or his title, the priest is listed in the ancient texts as being called Wenamon. He had been given a sacred task, to procure cedar wood from the distant shores of Syria, timber fit to construct a ceremonial barge for Amun's annual journey along the Nile. It was a simple mission, yet as Wenamon's journal reveals, the water he sailed were fraught with peril. His first port of call was Dor, a coastal town that sat under the shadow of piracy. Dor had fallen to the treacherous, a remnant of the sea peoples who had once ravaged Egypt's shores. Now they made their living through a mixture of legitimate trade and savage raids on vulnerable towns. The priest's ship slipped into the harbor unnoticed, and Wenamon was greeted not with hostility, but with gifts: beef, bread, wine, from the local chieftain, Beder. It seemed for a moment that the gods had smiled upon him. But that night Wenamon's fortunes took a sharp turn. One of his own crew members, seduced by the allure of wealth, fled into the darkness with the priest's silver, 7.5 pounds of precious metal meant for his transaction in Byblos. The next morning Wenamon confronted Beder, accusing him of collusion and demanding the return of the stolen silver. His words were sharp, filled with righteous fury. He was, after all, a servant of Amun. How could the gods allow such betrayal? Beder protested his innocence, but Wenamon was relentless. In his arrogance, he browbeat the chieftain, threatening him with divine wrath if the silver was not returned. Under pressure, Beder had little choice but to encourage Wenamon to leave Dor and continue his voyage. Yet the theft had left a bitter taste in the priest's mouth. As Wenamon sailed north, his mind was consumed with thoughts of revenge. In the next port, likely Sidon, he encountered more treacherous, and in a twist of irony decided to rob them. "I am taking your money," Wenamon recorded in his journal, his words brimming with priestly logic. Was it not another man of the treacherous who stole it? To Wenamon, this act of retribution was completely justified, a divine balancing of the scales, so to speak. But the pirates he robbed might have seen things a little differently. When Wenamon arrived in Byblos, it became clear that word of his theft had preceded him. The port's harbor master, wary of retaliation from the treacherous, ordered him to leave immediately. Wenamon simply refused. Every day for a month he ignored the harbor master's warnings, standing his ground on the shores of Byblos. He was determined to complete his mission, and Byblos, the ruling prince, seemed torn. On one hand, he feared the wrath of the treacherous, whose ships could appear at any moment. On the other, he did not want to lose a wealthy customer in Wenamon. In an attempt to placate the priest, Byblos sent him meat, wine, and even the companionship of a dancing girl named Tanetnot, whose presence Wenamon did not disdain. Yet, despite the gifts, no progress was made on procuring the cedar wood. The tension between the priest and the prince simmered, until finally, after interminable haggling, the timber was delivered to the beach for loading. It was at this very moment, just as Wenamon believed his mission was nearly complete, that 11 treacherous ships appeared on the horizon, their sails billowing as they approached the harbor. They demanded that Byblos arrest the priest and hand him over for his crimes. Wenamon watched the approaching vessels, sat on the beach and wept, his fate seemingly sealed. But Byblos had his own cunning plan. "I cannot arrest a messenger of Amun in my territory," he told the treacherous. "Let me send him off, and then you can chase him as you will." Wenamon had no choice but to comply. The prince provided him with a ship under charter, loaded the cedar wood, collected his money, and sent the priest out into the open sea. Behind him, the treacherous gave chase, their sleek galleys skimming across the water, intent on revenge. It was at this point that Wenamon's luck, or perhaps the intervention of the gods, finally turned. As the treacherous closed in, a fierce southeasterly gale swept up the coast. Wenamon's ship, driven by the powerful winds, raced northward, outpacing his pursuers. The treacherous, fearing their fragile galleys would be swamped in the rising seas, turned back, abandoning the chase. Wenamun's ship ran for shelter, eventually finding refuge in a place he called Alatia, probably Cyprus. Yet even here, Wenamun's troubles were far from over. The inhabitants of Alatia, who had suffered their own share of pirate attacks, saw the Egyptian priest and his crew as potential threats. They threatened Wenamun with death, suspecting him of being in league with the very pirates who had ravaged their shores. It seemed that his voyage might end in disaster after all. But once again, fortune favored the priest. The local queen interceded on his behalf, and Wenamun was spared. The remainder of his journey is lost to history, his journal ending abruptly in the sand of time. But it is likely that he made it back to Egypt, his sacred mission, though fraught with danger, finally fulfilled.